Hey guys, welcome to the show. For some interesting reason, and I can't explain why, when I pressed the live link, it said we went live, and then we're talking here behind the scenes with you, Steve and Jimmy, for about, 15, 20 minutes. It said that we weren't live. So can I confirm,
I still don't
please?
see. I'm watching. I'm watching YouTube right now. Hold on. Something's changing. No, oh, hold on. It's playing some commercial. Hang on a second.
Uh,
Okay. Now I think we're live because I see this thing here.
I,
Yeah. Okay.
wow.
All right.
Okay. All right, folks. Thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to introduce to you guys in the chat here with us our good friend Steve Rosen. How are you, Steve? Good to see you. We've got to repeat our intros again. I'm very sorry, bro. I don't know what happened with the link.
Whoever
And
caught
Jimmy.
that, thank you. Yeah, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Jimmy, good to see you guys. And I'm going to let you guys try and replay the intro while I just have a look and see what bloody happened with StreamYards.
Guys,
Okay.
guys, I'm getting like a couple voices here and a severe delay now.
That's because we're live.
Do you think I need to put on headphones?
Yeah, if you can do that, that'll be great. And that way you'll yeah, go. Hey, YouTube shows, we love it. We love them, don't we, Jimmy? We love YouTube shows. We love going live. Oh my lord. Nerd Halen can see us. Good to see you, bro. We've got Ryan Hall in the chat. Good to see you, brother. A very good friend of ours. Nelson Rodriguez is in the chat. Steve Rosen is in the chat. Jimmy is here. Johnny Heartbreaker. You guys are fantastic. And thank you for hanging out with us. Can you hear us, Steve?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Fantastic.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Hopefully the echoes have gone.
Actually, there's a severe delay.
Steve, should we have him try?
Jump out and jump back on, Steve. That seems to that little bit of mumbo jumbo does something with YouTube. Jump out
Jump
and
jump back on.
Hit that link that's in the chat that you hit last time.
Yeah.
One second. I got to calm my dog down. Hang
on. Oh my lord. Good to see you, Andy. You guys are awesome. Great to finally get together again with Steve Rosen. Second time he's been on the show, folks, and obviously here he is. We'll get Steve on. We'll get Steve on again. Here he is. He's got his earphones on. Steve.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent.
All right,
fantastic. Good to see you. Good to see you, Steve. Good to see you.
So nothing fantastic. We did was live?
We're live now. So it's our pleasure.
Sorry, I don't think so, yeah.
It's our pleasure to have you join us. And that was an interesting little YouTube little thing there. But never mind, yeah. We're here. Nerd Halen's in here, Andy Carson, a lot of your friends and fans. I'm going to say fans are in the chat, Steve, because these are guys that we know that were reading your articles back in the day.
Oh, nice.
And I'd just like to sort of share with you, obviously, the fact that Jimmy and I are fans of yours. We really appreciate the fact that you've given us this book. And we also appreciate the continuity and also the credentials that you have as a music journalist, but also as a friend of Eddie's in the past to give us this book, because that's what we want. We want that continuity. That means a lot to first-generation fans like us. So thank you, Steve, for being part of that process.
Oh, very welcome. And yeah, it was a long time in coming, Tonechaser. So Edward and I sort of stopped hanging out in 2003, and it took 17 years to kind of find, you know, that emotional thing that was going to allow me to write the book, and, you know, kind of go back and remember all those moments with him, and, you know, pulling out all the interviews I'd done and all the tapes, which I had never listened to since I'd done them. It's strange, man. When I do an interview with anybody, the only time I ever listen to it is in sort of transcribing the tape to write a story. But it's not like I go back to my interviews to listen to them. It's just a little strange for me to do that. It's uncomfortable. I don't know why. So when I started writing the book and going back and hearing all those interviews I'd done with him, and you know, hearing his voice.
I was gonna say, I bet it wasn't easy, like hearing his voice and you know, remembering the good times you guys had and all that.
Yeah, man, it was pretty. It got pretty intense, you know. And so I begin the book, and I remember the day because it was my birthday, and I think I did that consciously. So August 24th, 2020, I start writing Tonechaser. Thanks, man. And what happens 6 weeks later? Edward Van Halen passes away. So, you know, by now I've probably written, I don't know, probably I've got the intro done, you know, and it was a long intro. But I thought, I like this, you know, the intro is different. You know, typically an author's intro is like 2 or 3 pages, but we talked before, Jimmy, before we got live here. And yes, had I gone the traditional route and found a publisher, they would have looked at that intro and said, you can't write that. You can't write an intro that's 20 pages long. Cut that down to 3 pages, you know? And again, in following your input earlier, Jimmy, yeah, the book is 580 pages. And at a point in time, I'm like 300 pages into it, 350 pages. And I realized I'm not even close to getting done.
Mm-hmm.
Had I presented a 580 page book to a publisher, and I think one publisher did see the manuscript, they go, we can't publish a book this long. You know, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered what was on the page. They weren't going to do that, you know? So, yeah, so that continuity and yeah, man, I really tried to bring together sort of, by 2020, I've been writing for about 5 decades. I literally started writing in about 72. So I tried to bring all of that together into writing this book, into writing the best book that I possibly could, and bringing sort of my A+ game. I wanted every word and every paragraph, and I wanted it to be unique and different. And yeah, 14 months later, I think I did that. Again, until somebody reads a book, you can write the greatest novel in the world, right? Until somebody reads it, they go, oh, not so much, Steve, you know? So
Steve,
that was a little...
Steve,
yeah.
2 years later, and how many editions, though? How many editions later?
Right. So you guys have 2 very rare first edition copies. And I believe that I actually sold out of the first and second editions. I know it was less than 2 years. It was probably like a year and a half. I mean, they just started flying off the shelf, as it were. You know, I think I did a couple pretty significant podcasts. I did one with Eddie Trunk, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right, and he was great. And or maybe it was just a culmination of all the other podcasts.
That's right. Yeah, you did one with Eddie Trunk, and you did one here on the 5150 show. Yeah, those 2, those great significant podcasts.
Absolutely, man. Positively. So yeah, and so then I'm thinking, okay, the second edition's done. I need to come out with the 3rd edition. And like we were talking about before, I tried to make that seamless so there wasn't this huge gap between the 2nd and 3rd edition, so people didn't have to wait. I didn't have to take pre-orders, but wasn't to be. I couldn't get around it, you know. So there was about a 3-month lapse. I did get pre-orders sent out literally in about a week, and yeah. So we're in the 3rd edition, color cover, color back cover. Niels Lozauer took those amazing photos of Edward. You know, it's really funny. It wasn't a conscious thing, but the front and back photos are you can tell are actually from the same session that Neil did. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Day on the Green.
Look, I've got to say this, and it's been mentioned before, though, and we're going to repeat a lot of what's been said, I suppose, on other formats before, Steve. You know, the production of the book. You talk about the content, and obviously we're going to be talking about that a little bit more while we're live here, folks. But the production, you know, being a hardback, the pages, beautiful paper, and if you appreciate beautiful books, and a lot of us do, you know, this is a book that's up
No,
there
this is
with.
quality. Yeah, I mean, this
Yeah,
is quality.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
And like I
thing
said
that
before,
I'm sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
The thing that terrified me about self-publishing a book is that I did not want this to look like a self-published book. You've
Correct.
seen them, you know, and
Yes.
no offense to anybody who's had that done, but
That's a good
the
point.
paper is cheap, and the way the print lies on the paper and the cover,
It's bound,
rarely,
the binding, it's all
oh
crap.
God, the binding is, and I thought, my God, if my book comes out like that, you know, but these people, again, I had it printed in China. I was originally going to have it printed over here, for no other reason than I just thought, well, I'm going to have it printed in the U.S. But for various reasons, the printers over here didn't work. I met somebody, excuse me, Greg Trupiano, who had dealt with this Chinese publisher for a very long time, Chinese printer, excuse me. And he was amazing. He was my liaison. And those guys actually came over, the two guys who owned the company, and I met these guys, and they were just amazing. And their attention to detail, as you guys have noted, is just amazing. And yeah, the quality of the paper and the printing, and some little thing, you know, they'd see something and they go, oh, is this meant to be like this? This is before they start printing. And it'd be like, my God, I mean, they're really looking at it, and you know, the way they put the covers together. Thanks, man. And I actually put up, I don't know if you guys had seen it, they had actually sent me, I asked them, I'd love to see what it looks like, what the book looks like being printed. Could you guys take some videos? And they sent me a series of these very short videos. I think they were like, I don't know, a minute or half a minute each. And I actually posted those. You know, these machines that they have are just insane, you know, and putting them in the box. I had special boxes made, and they did an amazing job with that. And yeah, there was just amazing, you know, the color separation on the cover, and you know, just the binding and everything was just amazing. You know, I mean, to my mind, it looks every bit as good as any book printed on any music publisher in the world.
And like let me ask you that. I just noticed this just now. The chapter headings, right, are in that Van Halen font.
Yeah.
Is that I mean, what a great touch, you know? It's like that Van Halen font, and you know, the first
Jimmy.
page has like that shadow of Eddie, you know, that you read over. It's total quality, man. It's amazing.
Do you want to hold it up, Jim? Hold it
Oh
up.
yeah. Good idea.
So
you
give people
got like the font here, which is like the Van Halen 1 font, right? And then
got it.
you've got like, you know, the shadow Eddie here, you know, on the first page. You know?
Yeah. I'd love to say that was all me, but that was my art director, Daniel Gray. And that is a real photo of Ed, by the way. I mean, you know,
yeah.
Right. And it's funny because you think, oh, you know, you can just go take a silhouette of any picture, but it has to be a certain way because, you know, there's the cutouts, and it has to, you know, as a silhouette, it would look funny if it just, you know, if it wasn't kind of like the perfect picture. So he found that, and he had that font, and the font on the cover, Tonechaser. You know, we looked through a lot of stuff, and that's actually called Conceal, Conceal font. Man, just all those little pieces coming together. I wanted every piece to be special, you know, and the fact that you can see that, Jimmy, I mean, that's great. That's what I wanted, you know.
I mean, let's face it, this is a book that every Van Halen fan should have. I mean, there's no reason why, if you're a Van Halen fan, really, I mean, you should have this book. You need to have this book. Like before, like we were talking about, you know, before we thought we were live, but we weren't. I mean, you know, it was like, you know, it's like, you know, you've got those books that we talked about where, you know, and, you know, great book. I have them all, you know,
Yeah.
all those books by Chris Gill and Brad Talinsky and all that. But yours is different because it's like you were there and you tell us like how it was, you know, Eddie coming over to your house for the first time, or like we were saying, you know, that concert that you went to, I think Deep Purple or something, where you know you're sitting there with Ed like in the audience, and people are like, "Hey, I think that's Eddie Van Halen over there," and like crowding you and stuff like. What was that like being in that vicinity with Eddie? Because
So
you said
yes,
something about like you felt like maybe you were at some point, at sometimes you felt like you were, you know, like maybe invisible in a sense.
invisible for sure, man. So yeah, that was actually a Rainbow concert,
Rainbow,
Jimmy.
that's right, that's
Right,
right.
'79, and I mean, there's sort of a long backstory behind that, but I won't get into that.
Mhm.
You'll have to read the book to know what that is. But I knew that Edward was a Blackmore fan, and I had interviewed Richie, and you know I was able to score some tickets and backstage passes, and I thought, how monumental would it be to bring Edward Van Halen to a Rainbow show to see Richie Blackmore? You know,
Mhm.
so I set that up, and we walk in. I think we got there a little late. I think John Cougar opened, and
Mm.
why they would put John Cougar on a Rainbow show is beyond me. But so we sit down, and literally, you know, I can remember it too. I remember it so well. You know, we sit down, and um, they were good seats, right? So these were like, you know, press seats from the label, and you know they wanted to keep their journalists happy, you know, so we would write good stories about their artists, you know. So it was really good seats, and we sit down, and I'm looking around, and I can feel it, man. I can feel it, and I can see people leaning over and going, "That's Edward Van Halen. Is that
Yeah.
Edward Van Halen?" You know, and I don't think Ed, and this goes to who he was. I don't think that he was. And there's that first little contract we signed in February '85. Um, I don't think he was aware of it. I mean, we walked down to our seats, and he's walking in as just another fan of Richie Blackmore, and that said so much about him. You know, I mean, he could have made just a little bit of a scene, and you can imagine what would have happened. And he didn't do that. And I don't think that was ever in his head. He was just never wired that way, you know. And everybody says, oh, you know, his humility and this and that. That's a perfect example of it, you know. That he really didn't want to be recognized, you know. So we sit down, and I can hear like this hush, you know, getting louder and louder, and then I see people standing up, and they start walking over to him, you know. And I hate to liken this to any kind of a religious event because I don't want anybody to get angry with me. But I'm telling you, man, these people walking up to Edward and seeing Edward Van Halen at a Richie Blackmore concert was it was special. I mean, these guys, these people were they. I don't think they could believe that he was there.
Mhm.
And they come up, you know, and they want to shake his hand. They want to get a picture with him. And Edward is pretty patient for a while. I say a while, it's probably 10 minutes. It probably wasn't that long. And I could tell he was getting a little annoyed. So I tried to, you know, hey, you know, let Ed see, you know, without trying to be a heavy guy because no one, you know, I was a little guy and Edward could take care of himself. But, you know, they really respected that, you know, because they loved the guy. They weren't going to, you know, get in his face. They didn't want to, you know, bother him. And the whole time this is happening, you know, to get back to your original point, Jimmy, I'm sitting there and I'm watching this happen and I'm going, I am not even here, you know,
Mhm.
and not that I should be, you know, not that anybody should recognize me, but maybe it's the journalist in me. If I saw somebody at a show and I saw this person sitting next to them, I'd think, wow, I wonder who that is, you know, and I would be curious, you know, I maybe would ask who that was, but maybe that's just the journalist in me. But nobody asked, nobody was concerned, I don't think anybody saw me. And it's a weird situation. I mean, part of me completely understands it. Part of me, you're a little uncomfortable. I mean, you become like inconsequential in the whole equation, and it would happen every time I would go out with him, So you try to turn that around and you think, well, what's that like for Edward, not to be able to go out and not to experience that thing. So, celebrity has its cost as well. I mean, it's a pretty remarkable gig if you can get it, but there were some downsides to it. Not being able to go out is one of them. So, yeah, man, it was an amazing experience for sure.
That's
I
your next
love
project.
the
Oh, sorry, Jimmy.
No, it's okay, it's
there's
all
your
right.
next project there, Steve. You got to do it on audiobook.
So there is
Sorry,
no
Jimmy.
audiobook. This is the first I've ever said anything about it. Just stay tuned. Okay?
Read to you by
Seriously,
Steve Rosen.
you're gonna be astonished. So
Oh, great.
that's all we're gonna say. Okay?
I like. I was gonna say that. I mean, I love this book, Steve, because you kind of reading it, you feel like you're there with them, and like you feel like you're so sincere in like your insecurities and stuff about Eddie. Like, you feel like you say something, you're like, oh, why the hell did I say that? And stuff, and it's really endearing, and especially being a fan, you're wondering, like, I've met Eddie twice, only through like meet and greets and stuff like that that you pay for, in a sense, nothing like having dinner with them or anything like that, but you do sense that like the guy is special and all that, and like you don't want to say something stupid, but so I love the idea that like you say something and then you're like, oh my god, why did I say that? That was so ridiculous. It's just fun.
Honestly, Jimmy, that's who I am. I've always been that person, and like, oh my god, I'm going to go talk to Jeff Beck. Don't say something stupid to the guy. Don't say something stupid to Gary Moore or Paul Kossoff. And if you look at that, I think if you dig deep into there, I don't know if necessarily that Jeff Beck or any of these other amazing guitar players I spoke to ever sensed that in me, because you're trying to be professional about it, and you're there for a gig, and a magazine wants a story. But I think there's underlying that feeling that I had about myself comes a sincerity that I'm in the same room with these people, and you don't want to be you don't want to nerd out on these guys, you don't want to geek out, you don't want to be gushing and just sit there and saying how amazing they are for a half hour. But I think some of that vulnerability maybe comes through, or hopefully it does. But yeah, around Edward, I was always aware, because I did feel so comfortable around him that I didn't want to say something that was going to be stupid or insulting. I would never say anything purposely insulting about him. But I was always so aware of that. And the way I kind of got around that, you sort of hinted at it, Jimmy, was I thought, okay, so how do I present myself as this person who is sitting there watching Edward Van Halen play my guitar on my couch, and I'm watching him and I'm thinking, my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. How lucky I am. Don't say something. Don't spoil the moment. Don't, and I thought, how can I do that? And it kind of came to me, I need to be two people. So I'm going to be the participant. I'm going to be that person sitting on that couch, but I'm also going to be the observer. This is the eye in the sky. This guy can look down at this Steve Rosen character and go, Steve, don't say anything. Don't say anything stupid to Edward. Don't be a geek out there, And in that way, I was able to put like that insecure Steve Rosen up there and let the, observer take all of that, and I could kind of, just be the participant. But it was a hard tightrope to walk between being his friend, being a fan, loving what he did, and being this journalist,
Mhm.
So, at times it was a little difficult because I'd ask him questions, and we had that conversation 2 days ago, and I knew what the answers were, but you have to pretend that you've never heard them
Mhm.
before because you're writing it for a magazine. So, yeah, it was difficult, and yeah, exposing that about myself. Yeah, it's not the
Wow.
easiest thing to do, but I thought if I'm going to be honest talking about Edward, I have to be honest with myself. Um, showing this person,
Mhm.
and I think, yeah, I think people responded to it. I think, as you said, Jimmy, they kind of got that.
I
So
appreciate you explaining that, Steve, because I've just had an epiphany. Just as you've said that, I've studied social anthropology, and anthropologists, a crucial part of social anthropology is field work, and how they go out there as observers and participants in this cultural situation that they're at or in or involved in, and they're trying to, and they have to describe and analyze that back to other people who aren't participants in that culture. And that's exactly what you've done. You're a musical anthropologist.
I love that, man. That is so great. I really love that, Andrew. Yeah,
You
you're
what?
right. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, Steve Rosen, musical anthropologist. No, that's exactly what it was. The difference is that everybody in the world knew or thought they knew who Edward Van Halen was.
We
So,
don't.
right? So now it's
Yeah.
like you have to describe this person or really show this person that said Van Halen to these people, and this is really who he is, as opposed to some guitar player no one ever knew about, right? Which would have been infinitely easier because there's no preconceived notions, right? It's not like we're going out to, you know, check out a lion. Well, we all kind of know what a lion is, but if it was some, yeti or some beast we'd never seen out in the field and we had to describe it, that's a more difficult thing. So that's so interesting. You would say that, man. I love that.
It's funny, Steve, because like what you were saying about like being cool around Eddie is we run an Eddie Van Halen convention out here in Connecticut every year, and with the guys that show up, we joke that if Eddie ever showed up, we'd just be like, oh yeah, hey Ed, how you doing, whatever, you know what I mean, and like not geek out, talk about anything but guitars and amps, how's the golf game, shit like that, you know what I mean. Meanwhile, you've got 1,000 gear questions, but you're not going to ask them.
That is so interesting, Jimmy. Forgive my stupidity. We communicated before. You run the convention out there?
You might. I help me and my friend Joe. You might have talked with Joe Suma. He's the guy that I think you
Right,
probably
right,
talked to. But
right.
yeah,
That's what it was.
we ended up kind of creating that a couple of years ago, and we do that. We try to do it every year.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so cool. No, you're right, Jimmy. Yeah, you get a room full of the most rabid Van
Yeah,
Halen fans on earth, and if Ed walked through that door, yeah,
yeah,
they'd all be, yeah, they wouldn't be able to, And trust me, I understand that syndrome. Let me tell you.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's
you know,
it's fascinating, man. It's fascinating. Um, the other thing that I really took away from this book was I don't know. I kind of found it. Let me ask you what you thought about this, and like, what did you think about this whole thing where like Eddie, like you'd hang out with Eddie or something, and then like 2 days later, 3 days later, like he wouldn't remember. That's kind
that
of
was that was
troubling,
odd, man.
Yeah.
And I write about it in the book, and it happened many times. The Blackmore incident, because later he did an interview with Jazz Obrecht from
Mhm.
Guitar Player. Jazz famously wrote that big cover
Mhm.
on Edward, and he talks about going to the Blackmore show, and and though he didn't mention my name, which is fine, I will bet you $1 million he didn't remember that he was there with me.
Wow.
And
How does
and
he
not
think he got? How does he think he got there?
I don't know. I think it was just his head was so full of guitars and what am I going to do next and the next record, and it wasn't a conscious thing like he was trying to
Right, right.
play
That's
down or
what,
discredit
right. That's why
anything
I'm
I
so
did.
fascinated by it. It's not a conscious thing. It's just
No, and it was weird, and at times I try not to take it personally because I knew it wasn't personal, but it's like, wow, Edward, really,
mhm.
the Les Paul. I mean, to me, that's unbelievable. You know, so briefly, and I don't want to give the story away. I want people to go and buy the book. But so
Sure.
Edward is being inducted into the inaugural Rock Walk, right? The flagship Guitar Center store where you put your hands in cement. The first one, it was Edward, Les Paul, I think Martin, one of the Martin guitars, one of the Ludwigs was there, I believe, and I was able to get Edward and Les Paul together in a room, and I know that Edward had an amazing time. He ended up kind of conducting the interview himself. The next day, I asked Edward because Ed didn't tell me that he was going to be there. I found out from somebody. So this is when I'm in the thick of writing what was going to be Edward's authorized biography, and just showed some of those simple little contracts earlier, Andrew, that are in the book. And so I just said to Ed, I go, Ed, listen, man, I don't want to be like a stalker, but if you could just give me like a little heads up of, maybe if you're going to do something like that, just so I could be there, and be able to document it. He goes, well, I didn't know I was going to be there to the last minute, I wasn't even going to go. And I said, yeah, well, yeah, I was there. And he goes, oh, you were there. And I'm thinking he's joking. This is the night before. I go, yeah, I was there. And I didn't say, yeah, I introduced you to Les Paul, because at that point it's like, you don't even remember I was there. So yeah, it was just strange. At a point in time, I just kind of chalked it up. It got a little weird, but hey, that's who he was. It was strange. I mean, he could remember the first song he ever wrote, the first guitar riff when he was, 14 messing around, but he couldn't remember that. So
It's just disheartening, like being his friend like you were, and then like it just escapes him. It's tough.
it was a little, it was a little funny. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
But
uncomfortable. I
we
mean,
we can say that. We can say that. We can say that. There's nothing wrong with saying
yeah,
that.
look, I guess I'm always so aware. I don't want people to look, oh, fucking Rosen, thin skin, get over it, and so it's like I don't want to go too far the other way, but yeah, it was disheartening. I mean, it really was, because I thought those were pretty big moments from him. Billy Gibbons, I knew he loved Billy Gibbons, and Blackmore and Les Paul, and other times when we were, we'd be working on something or doing something and he'd just forget about it. But, at the end of the day, he was amazingly present, and understanding. And so, you just try and balance all that out, right?
I was going through the book again, and you were talking about your first interview with Ed, and there's something in that I missed the first time. Is that I think you were asking him how he gets the sound, and in like Van Halen folklore, there's this thing where Eddie was telling people that he was telling people about the Variac, right, and how he turns it up to get the tubes cooking, right? Which is not what he was doing, right? And it's funny because like he says it in your interview, which is fascinating, where like he's like, I turn the if the amp's like 110, set to like 110, he turns it to 130, where kids were doing that and blowing up their amps, where in reality he was draining, he was keeping voltage from coming to the amp and turning it down to like 90, which and like folklore was like this big like scandal in a sense, right? But going back, I was like, oh, it's right here in Steve's interview where he says it, I think for the first time, because it was your first interview. You know, that was 1978, you know?
It was. And that interview came out in Japan. Actually, it was for a Japanese magazine called Player. Right. So, I mean, I play guitar, but I didn't know enough. When he said, yeah, I turned up to 130. I didn't know that that's not what you were supposed to do.
I don't think anybody did. I don't think anybody did. That's why kids were turning up that, turning the thing up to 130 and blowing up their amps. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting because, that was probably the very first time I'm thinking again that, he talked about the tapping thing as well. And, so yeah, you think about how early that was, but he was so aware of what he was doing. It wasn't like it was just some thing that he'd come up with. I mean, he was just so aware of it, and in fact, everything that he talked about how he, was setting up his vibrato bar and the springs, and I mean, he just understood all of that stuff so well. And to be able to explain it that well in what was ostensibly, I think, maybe the first time he'd ever spoken about it, I thought that was pretty amazing. And it's funny. I remember that interview. It was a phoner, and again, I think the Observer was looking down and thinking, "Yeah, man, that was a good interview, but it could have been so much better." You look back at it now, and I think, my God, that was there. Maybe the first interview was ever done, and look at all the other stuff you could have asked him, but that's just me kind of, maybe never being satisfied with it or whatever. But yeah. And the amazing thing, Jimmy, we talk about his humility. I mean, he could have told people, yeah, I turn it down to 90, or, I wind my, the pickups exactly like this, and I use this kind of wire and this many windings. I mean, he could have given every secret away, and no one would have sounded like him. So for him, it's weird for him to think that, yeah, I'm going to tell people I jack it up instead of turning it down, was strange, for those same reasons, those early gigs, he would turn around. Although I think Dave had some input. Hey, man, turn around. Don't let him see that, as if you're going to see what he was doing had he turned around and, gone home and been able to duplicate that anyway. Yeah, sometimes he was kind of aware of that thing he had created, and other times it just he just seemed totally unaware about it. That he would just talk about anything. I think as the years went by, and I think maybe he matured more and realized that no one was ever going to sound like me. I think he was more open to kind of divulging, what he thought were secrets. I mean, I think so.
Sure.
Yeah.
You were talking about earlier in the book about how he used to lie about his age. Like, it'd be more impressive of him being 21 than 23,
That's exactly right. I mean, I heard that. I thought, oh my God, that was unbelievable. I think maybe Warner's had something to do with that.
Yeah.
Why he would have gone, he and Alex, right? Because 2 years. 2 years really makes a difference. Like it makes the legend all the greater because he was 2 years younger. Oh man, that was so funny.
I'm glad you mentioned Alex Van Halen, because obviously he's going to be in the news a little bit later on in the year, isn't he, Steve? With his memoir coming out, and Jimmy and I were talking about this before you jumped on the show. Jimmy was asking me, had I heard your 5-hour interview with Alex, and that's on your YouTube page.
Correct.
And I've put that link in the chat here, folks. And if you're watching on replay, I will include Steve's YouTube page and also his Facebook page for you to go and check out these things.
Oh, cool.
But that 5-hour interview that you had, and I know that Jimmy's got a couple of questions that he wants to ask you, but that 5-hour interview is pretty impressive.
That is gold, man. Again, everybody needs to buy this book and listen to that AVH interview. It is just gold, man. It's just gold.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. So that interview with Alex. So again, we're back in, I think that was 1985.
Mhm.
I've just signed sort of a more official contract with Edward. He's given me the okay to write his authorized biography. So I go out and try to find all the key players, right? Promoters who promoted shows back in Pasadena, his friends, um, musicians he had played with, pre Van Halen, music teachers. Obviously, I had to speak with the band, and Alex from the beginning was really supportive of the book. Um, I think he wanted Edward to do the book. So I caught Alex on a good day, and we sat down, and yeah, man, what you hear is what we did over the course of 2 days.
Mhm.
I thought it was all done in one day, and then I look back and I go, there's no way we sat here for that length of time over the course of one day. And honestly, I know it was 2 days. It could have been 3 days. For some reason, my notes, the days, I didn't have it chronicled, accurately. And again, like I'd mentioned before, Jimmy, I never go back and listen to the interviews after I've done them. So honestly, I didn't listen to the interview before putting it up. I listened to little bits and pieces just to see if the quality was pretty good. So to hear you say stuff like, it's gold, knowing you probably know as much about Van Halen as anybody, and being, Andrew, hardcore fans, and to come away gleaning information, stuff that you did not know. To me, that's precisely why I put it up there.
I loved Alex was so he was in a great mood, very
Sure.
helpful, right? It sounded like he wanted to help with the book, and he
Yep.
was there, and he was completely honest. Like like I was telling Andrew before, like he was telling his truth, like he was telling his side,
Yeah.
right? And I'll tell you what, man. Um, Again, if you're a Van Halen fan, you need to listen to this. Listen to it over a span of a week. You have to listen to this. But there's some instances there where where it sounds like it's Eddie, like he's got the same inflections as Eddie sometimes. I mean, it might have happened over those 5 hours like 8 times, but I'm like, whoa, that sounded just like what Eddie would say in Eddie's voice, in a sense.
Wow. That is
Yeah,
so
it's great.
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, uh, uh, I did want to say one thing. Um, I think one or two people said to me, "Oh, well, why did you come out with that now?" Meaning, subsequently hearing that Alex was coming out with his book, and
Perfect timing.
and in my defense, I had been sitting on that interview, probably going back to December,
Yeah.
and part of me, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be completely honest. I was going to be a little selfish with that one. It's like, you know what? I'm going to keep that one for myself. I'm not going to put that one out there. I don't know why I thought like that. The length of it, and I don't know, but I thought, you know what? There probably is some cool stuff in here. And when I did hear that Alex's book was come out, I thought all this is going to do is not that he needs it. It's going to market his book more. Again, not that he needs that, but I thought, yeah, it was like, okay, here's this amazing interview with
Mhm.
Alex from 1985. I don't think anybody, look, if anybody ever interviewed Alex from 1985, I mean, I've never even seen an interview, so I know that this was probably the longest interview we ever did. And so now you kind of have this as your reference, and now when Alex talks about maybe some of those moments that are in the interview, you can go, yeah, oh, great, Alex is expanding on what was in the interview, or that kind of thing. So
Sure.
yeah, man, it was
Steve,
all.
Steve, I just want to interrupt here. You do not have to defend yourself by releasing that interview. If people think that might be a negative thing that you've done. They've got no idea how social media works, and the fact that you released that interview to coincide with the marketing of the upcoming book is perfect social media marketing, and you should be celebrated for that because it's tying into the algorithm. So if it hits back to what you're doing on your social media, onto your book, it's perfect. It's what it's there for. And if people think anything other than that, well, they're idiots. They got no idea, Jimmy.
I'll tell you that interview gave me faith in Alex's book because I don't know, like you never really heard from Alex, like you said, Steve, right? But man, in that interview, he is so honest and coherent, and just like and I don't know, just great. Like just like that's how you want an interview to be in a sense, right? And he's telling you like stories about them coming over on the ship and when that was and what they did and how much money his dad had in his pocket and everything from that to signing the contracts and going out and then the Hagar coming into the band. It just gave me faith that this book, I don't think he's going to get into really the minutia of how Van Halen ran, which is what some people want. It's going to be about his brother and stuff, but it gives me faith that it's going to be good because that interview was just amazing. I've told everybody I know that's a Van Halen fan that they need to listen to this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
100%, Jimmy. And I agree with you that it dovetails into perfectly an appreciation and an expectation that we're going to have now as Van Halen fans, Steve, into the book, that Alex is going to release. Because at the end of the day, Jimmy, you've just said it. He's lucid. He's, Alex knows stuff. He's a smart guy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's, and it'll be interesting to see what perspective he comes from with this book. It's going to be fascinating.
And in there, I'm not going to say where it is so people can listen to it, but in there is like some shocking news about Dave, man. There's some shocking news about Dave. So I'm not, you got to listen to it to find out.
That's cool. Yeah. And Andrew, you brought up something. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, the reason I came out with that when I did was to coincide with the release of the third edition of my book. I thought, there'll be some focus there. You're right, because my book came out right around the time of that interview. So yes, that's what happened. And yes, Jimmy, you're right. Alex, there's nobody left who knows that story but Alex. Look, Mike does, of course. Sure. Dave has written his book, but again, to have that, obviously being the brother, to have the blood relation, all of those stories, nobody knows those but Alex.
So he was telling stories about like his dad got arrested or something, by mistake or whatever. It's just like some stuff that you never even heard, I honestly wish I wish that thing was 12 hours long, man. I could not get, when I got to the last part, I'm like, man.
Well, you want to know something? That was that entire interview. However, and I don't even want to say it. I don't remember this, but I actually interviewed Alex in '83, and I don't know what's on that interview, but maybe I'll get around to putting that one out. So
I was going to say, because didn't you, like in '83, didn't you? Because I think it was you that did an interview with Michael Anthony too, right?
Right, but I think I did the one with Mike also, because I think that's up on the YouTube page. I think that was right around '85 as well. That was for the book, mainly.
That was a great one too. Anyway,
that was pretty cool. Yeah, Mike had some things to say about Dave, huh? Yeah.
Greg Roberts wants you to pray tell about Dave.
No. You gotta listen to this, man. It's almost like telling you this that Darth Vader's Luke's father. You got to listen to this. You got to listen to this yourself. You're gonna thank me for not telling you.
See, and what's interesting is, not that I ever had those kinds of conversations with Alex, kind of way back in the day, him telling me those things about his family or Dave, that was all centered around the book. But Edward we would talk a lot, while Dave is still in the band, and he would start talking about, you know, the relationship with he and Dave were kind of weird. I mean, early on, and you know, different things with the band and stuff, and those were all the bits that at the time when he was telling me that stuff, I mean, I could never print that stuff, and he'd say, "Don't print that," you know, because had that stuff come out at the time, you know, I mean, Warner Brothers would have flipped out. What do you mean you're having these arguments with your lead singer? And what do you mean you're going to quit the band? You know, I'm exaggerating here. So fast forward all these years later, I'm writing the book, and I'm coming to that moment, and Edward says, and I'm listening to the tape, and he's talking about whatever, you know, and he goes, "Don't print that." Well, I put Edward saying "don't print that," as you guys know, in the book, because I wanted people to understand how personal and important it was at the time that he was telling me. All of these years later, when he says that, you know, it doesn't become as critical, but you still understand how important it was at the time had he said those things. You know, I could have taken out where he said "don't print this" and just printed the rest of the interview, and I don't think it would have had nearly the impact. But the fact that he said those things to me and that I included that little bit in there, I think it just it makes it a deeper experience for the reader, because, oh my God, Edward really didn't want Steve to print that, or, you know, maybe he never told anybody else, but now I can read about that, you know. So that was my feelings about it. You know, that's why
and Steve, we've got to put that into context too. We've got to put that into context too, because, you know, for example, John Conklin is a very dear friend of ours who hopefully jump on at some stage when he gets back from work. He could say to me, you know, "Andrew, you know, Jimmy is secretly a Dodgers fan. He's secretly a Dodgers fan, but don't print that. Don't tell him I told you that." you know, and I mean, and you know how you can tease someone sometimes by saying, "But don't say that, don't," you know. So you don't know really what the context is. So don't jump up and down, folks, you know.
Yeah. And part of me thinks, well, you know, and I never thought about it, but you bringing this up, Andrew, part of me thinks, well, maybe, I mean, at that point, Edward's really telling me how he feels, you know, and if he was unhappy about something or whatever. So now I'm thinking, well, maybe he really did want me to print that, you know. I mean, I'm sure he didn't, but you know what I mean? It's like, you know, when you tell somebody, don't tell anybody, you're saying, tell everybody, right? But
well, it's like Jimmy when he was at, you know, college, you know, he used to go up to his mates and said, you know, "I like that girl over there, but don't tell her. Don't tell her." and what did his mates do? He'd go up to the girl and say, "Hey, Jimmy really likes you."
But Steve, I think you including that whole thing is just another example of like how completely effing honest this book is. I mean, this is just, you know, I love it for that. As you get a picture of like who Eddie was. Like I said, you know, warts and all. We can talk about Ed's, like, you know, warts, let's say, right? There's no, you know, and back then when I was a kid, I mean, you know, I thought Ed walked on water. You know what I mean? But now, like, as you get older, you know, you hear more of the stories and stuff, and like it doesn't lessen your respect for the guy, but it is nice to like have him be more human and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I agree, you know, and again, that was a tough tightrope to walk, you know. I mean, how honest do I get, you know? You know, for a while there, it was going to be like, oh, well, I'm not even going to say anything, if, you know, when Edward's drinking or doing drugs, you know. I thought, you can't. That's ridiculous. That'd be like the opposite. People say, "You mean to tell me all the time you're with her, you never saw Ed take a drink?" You know what I mean? It would be like, it lessens the rest of the book. It's like, well, if he's not writing about that, or he's lying about that, is he lying about everything else, you know? But I tried to temper those moments, you know, and be completely honest. And, you know, I did drugs with him, you know, and I write about that. And I never really drank because I write about it. I used to get migraine headaches, but I got drunk with him a couple times, and it was fun. I mean, there were amazing moments, you know. But
Yeah.
that's who he was, you know, right? And again, I write about it, and I hate myself. I don't hate myself. I should have said something to him about his cigarette smoking.
Hmm.
I knew that if he ever got sick, and you know, you don't think of him ever getting sick, it was going to be because of cigarettes and not because of the cocaine and not because of, you know, drinking. You know, because he always looked so healthy. My God, you know.
Hmm.
You know, usually guys are drinking, they get heavy and they get bloated, right?
Hmm.
He looked. I don't think he ever gained more than 2 pounds in his entire life. He looked
Wow.
incredible, you know.
I know.
So, yeah, wish he hadn't have smoked for sure.
You know, Ed probably, you know, you could have said that to him. You know, he probably wouldn't have listened. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, you're right. You're right, and I think it was me walking on eggshells. Oh my God, I'm going to say that to him. He's going to say, "Well, fuck you. I'm going to," you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably said, "I smoke." You know. I guess I was afraid of him getting angry at me, like who are
Hmm.
you? Just because you
Yeah.
don't, you know what I mean? Like some self-righteous thing, which was the last thing on my mind. You know, if he was eating a lot, you know, I probably would have said something. Ed, you're getting a little.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
know, the
Yeah. Tone it
cigarette
down.
smoking thing is like, you know, just couldn't bring myself to say anything. Again, not that it would have done any good, but you know, yeah.
Apologies, guys. you know, some people know I've got a dog here that goes in and out constantly and is like knocking on the door over there. It's a whole
No, it's
thing,
all good. No,
you
it's all
know.
good, bro.
But
It's
yeah,
it's
that's
all
why I get
good.
up. That's why I get up. You know, he will not sit still. He will not sit still. Anyway, um, Steve, I wanted to tell you, man. Like you are kind of engrossed in these famous pictures of Eddie, like you know, like the one on the back cover where Eddie's got his hand around you. You're holding the famous, you know, Frankenstein and stuff like that. You know, it's like there's one that I saw in the book where hang on, let me see if I can find it here because I had a poster. Where is that? Where's the pictures? I had a poster when I went to college that came in. I think it was in Guitar for the Practicing Musician, and it was kind of taken from the same. I think it was taken from the same photo shoot. Where's those pictures?
Yeah, it's hard to find the photos in there.
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, hang on. Where is that? Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. Okay. There's this one there where it says Edward Van Halen and Sammy Hagar are backstage at the Joe Louis Arena.
Oh
So
yeah,
so it's this one right here where Ed's got like the red. Where is it? Ed's got like the red sweater on right here.
yeah.
Right. There was a famous poster that I had when I went to college, and it's the same. It's from the same photo shoot. And like, what was it like being being that close? And like, there's these famous pictures. Even these where you're holding the X, and then he's got the Rude guitar. You know, these pictures right here are like,
Yeah.
these are iconic in Van Halen world, man. You know.
Yeah. So, those top pictures were taken by Glenn LaFerman, and the
Yeah.
one with the sweater was Ross Marino. Sadly passed away a while ago. Well, actually, it's been many years now. Um, but yeah, it was amazing. And it's funny, Jimmy, because I've had a lot of people come to me saying, "Oh my God, did you see? Were there any photos taken of the back of the guitar, the Rude guitar?" It's like, I
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't know enough to know that I didn't know enough. It's like,
Yes.
had I known it was important to all
Yeah.
you freaks out there, I would have had a picture of the back of the guitar taken.
Yeah.
But that's what I love. It's like a picture like that takes on this different mythology, because for guys like you,
No,
that body
dude.
means something. For me, it was just, and I'm going to take credit for this. That was my idea. Hey man, let's take these two bodies and take some pictures. And Glenn was there and he shot those photos. But that was my idea. And I think Ed kind of liked it. But I didn't have a clue that these bodies meant anything. I just thought that they were one of 100 different bodies without necks that he had lying around.
Mm-hmm.
You just never think that it's going to have this holy grail mythology attached to it. So when people come to me, and you say those things, it's like I love that, because it wasn't a conscious thing at all. And the picture with Sammy and Ed, yeah, that was fantastic. I actually met Sammy before Edward. I think just a few months. And I always thought Sammy was, very cool guy, professional. I know that when he got into the band, Edward was overjoyed, and they make those records, and it's sort of next level Van Halen. And then the romance starts to sour. And it's, Edward tells me, and Sammy, and I didn't go out and talk to Sammy about that. But, the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. But, while it was working, it worked pretty amazingly. But again, I always thought Sammy was cool. I actually liked his book. I thought that was a pretty honest book that he had written.
I thought in the very beginning, like I read it and I was like, who the hell is this guy? But honestly, man, over time, it's pretty honest and it's pretty true.
Yeah.
Like what he says is true. Like you didn't want to believe it then, And I gotta be honest, like back until like back up to like, I don't know, when was it? About 2004, right? I always saw Ed with like rose-colored glasses and stuff. And then the 2004 tour came around and it was just a disaster. And I saw it like I saw it like 5 times, many times like in the rings where like I'm like a feet away from Edward, and you can see that Edward just was not right, But everybody goes through their periods and stuff. But I'm the first to admit that I was up to a certain time I almost was like an EVH apologist. And that's why I love this whole thing where we're trying to figure out like exactly what's true, and I love that. And like I said, Hagar's book turns out to be like he was right. He was right about a lot of stuff, if not all of it. It's not like he just made all that stuff up.
No, not at all. And so you usually the 4 in 2004. I stopped hanging out with Edward in 2003. By 2003. And again, I don't want to give the book away, but he had changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And, we all try and figure out what happened and what were the reasons. And, was the drug thing worse? Was the drinking, the marriage, the label, the band? I mean, his health,
There's a famous interview where the guys went on Howard Stern in 1998 with Gary Sharon, and Ed was. It's almost like cringeworthy to listen to because Ed was just all over the place, and Howard's telling him, Eddie, sit down, and Eddie's trying to play guitar. It was just bad, and I kind of sensed that was 98. I mean. I wasn't around 97 or 96 or any of those years, but to me, it seems like 96, 98, that's when Eddie kind of like started acting a little strange. And then 2004, forget it,
I can tell you
were there in 1998, right?
I was, and he was, it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And again, I write in the book, it started way before 98, and even 95. I sensed it. And again, I don't know what it was. And it's not, it was just, he was just a different person. Or there was like this person that I knew was inside there somewhere, but I couldn't find him. I couldn't reach him. And I sensed that, probably hard to remember exactly. Read my book if you want to know exactly. I'm kidding. But it was probably early 90s. So, when I hear hardcore fans and people who know him and followed him and you say those things to me in like 2004, that tour, and he was on Howard, and I didn't know that. In '98, it makes me think that I wasn't just manufacturing something because we weren't as close as we were. I thought, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I've changed, or I want more from him that he can't give or doesn't want to give, and I didn't think that was true. But when I hear, you guys talk about that, it's like it kind of validates what I was seeing and sensing,
Well, we've got to remember, Steve, that in '95, during that Balance tour, the band were arriving to gigs in separate buses. They weren't traveling together. Eddie and Sammy weren't even looking at each other on stage, and we didn't know that. We didn't know that at the time. It wasn't until, years later, Jimmy, where we got that information that the band was complete, just not even talking to each other. And it was disappointing. You could probably pick it up now when you go back and watch a lot of these live footages, and you can see that Sammy's trying to initiate some kind of eye contact, but other than that, it's just like, oh. But no, I think you guys are right. Definitely something before Balance changed with Eddie. Definitely.
Well, I'll tell you, I tell the story about Balance where I was waiting for Balance. I remember around Christmas time, one of the guitar magazines had like a spread about like they're releasing a new Van Halen album. It had the cover art, right? I'm like, oh my god, can't wait. So so whenever it was released, and I went and got it that day. And I'm driving back to work, and I'm listening to it, and like, you got Seventh Seal opening up, but then you get to like songs where like there's a song on there where Ed's just dropping shit on piano wire. It's like, what is happening to this band? Like they can't fill out this album. There's a drum solo on there, right? Wow. It's just like, and I was like, wait, these guys can't write, like, I don't know how many songs are on there, 9, 10, but like seriously, like 3 of them are filler, just like complete BS. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this band is like not. You could tell that this band is not. They can't write another complete song to, they have to. And that track is from like that track with the piano wire is from like 1985. It's wow. Like it just seemed like it wasn't. It seemed like there was something wrong in that camp. Do
you think other people felt that same way about Balance?
I don't know. I'll tell you what. People love Balance. I don't get it. I'm not. There's some good stuff on there.
Yeah.
Okay. There's stuff like Seventh Seal. I'll tell you, the only real song that I feel is Van Halen worthy on that album, really, is Aftershock, and people that know me know that. But people do love that album. I don't. There's some good material on there, but nobody talks about these songs that like are just bullshit. Sorry, Andrew.
No. Look, I agree with you, Jimmy, and I'm in that camp, Steve and Jimmy. I love the album. I love it. I anticipated that album too, and it came out in January.
Me too. I want to say I wanted to love that album.
Yeah, and I love it, and there's some of my favorite Van Halen songs are on that album, and then you find out that the band, that you loved so much, where they were sharing all these fun times and laughing and hanging out with each other, just not long after this album, just weren't doing it. It's like, but I agree with you guys. Something definitely happened, and a lot of people can probably blame Sammy, but I think Eddie had a little bit to do with that combustion, the combustibility of the band. Steve, I've got a question that I want to ask you quickly. In '97, you did a outstanding interview. It's one that a lot of guitar players look back as probably one of the classic guitar interviews ever, and it's the only guitar interview you ever need to read in relation to knowing anything about Jimmy Page, the Guitar Player 1977 article that you did with him. It's fantastic. So when you met Eddie, did this relationship that you have with other guitarists, did that kind of open a door with him as far as your credentials go with being a journalist? Because you know, because he obviously welcomed you, or was it the fact that you knew a little bit about guitars and guitar playing? What was it?
I love that question, Andrew, and I've tried to figure it out in my own head. And part of me thinks if I had the knowledge that I had about guitar players, knowing a little bit about technical stuff, but being a guitar player, not a great guitar player, I was a good guitar player. I was a better songwriter, so
Okay.
I understood that part of it, and I think Edward did respond to that. You know, if I made a comment about a song, and Edward is a songwriter. I mean, we sometimes overlook that, and you know, he was an amazing writer. I mean, I don't think he followed, kind of that verse, B section, chorus, bridge kind of thing. I think with him it was just riffs, but he had an innate sense of how songs were built. But I think it was more having this overall knowledge about guitar players and songwriting and being a guitar player, as bad as I was, more so than me interviewing Jimmy Page. And if you think about that timing, I am out on the road with Zeppelin in I think it's April,
Yes.
or May, literally a month or 2 months before I meet Edward in June '77. So yeah, I interviewed all these other people. I don't even know, and I read about this in the book. I don't think Edward, I'm pretty positive he never read any story I ever wrote.
Really?
And I don't even think he knew the people I had met. Now, he would come over to my house. I was living up on Weepaw Way in the Hollywood Hills, which I famously write about, and that's about 6 minutes from where Edward was living in Coldwater Canyon with Valerie. And all the walls, in fact, you can see some of them back here. In fact, there's Richie there, are covered with the pictures of me and the people I've interviewed. So he'd come over and he'd look at the pictures, but it was more like like he was looking at them scientifically, like, who's that? And I go, oh, that's Gary Moore. He go, and not that he had to be impressed by anything, but he was never impressed by it. So in answer to your question, Andrew, I don't think it mattered to him that I had met all of these famous people. And maybe that goes to, introducing him to, Blackmore and Les Paul and Billy Gibbons. It was like, he's thinking, well, the guy's a music journalist, he probably knows those guys. And, that's just kind of par for the course, I've really tried to figure it out. I think I could have been a bank teller and still maybe had that knowledge of guitar players. And I think maybe the relationship would have been the same. Could be entirely wrong, but I'd like to think that he kind of was a little aware of what I did. I think I write about it in there. I had one of the covers I did for Guitar World, those 3 wonderful Guitar World covers. And I think I had the issue at the house when he was over, go, yeah, man, here's a story that we did, And he kind of looks at it, he kind of puts it down, And this is another little bit of the story I wanted to tell. So in one of the chapters, we go to the NAMM show in New Orleans. The NAMM show is the National Association of Music Merchants, where all of the amp people and guitar people come together, and they're hawking their new lines. And I wrote about it, and it was pretty amazing. He jams with Brian May and Ted Nugent, and I'm hanging out with him in his hotel room. It was a fun couple days. So I write about it, and he's over at the house, and this is pre-computer, so I have the typewritten story. And he goes, oh, what's this? And he kind of picks it up, and I've always wanted him to read one of my stories. I wanted him to know that I this is what I did, and I wanted him to think, oh, yeah, Steve, you're a good writer, So, but now he's picking up and he's reading it, and I'm thinking, maybe he's going to hate it, or beware what you wish for. And he's looking at it, and he puts it back down, and he goes, silver. And I go, excuse me? He goes, silver. I had no idea what he's talking about. There's a portion of the story when I drive over to his house because we're going to drive down to the LAX to get on a plane to fly to New Orleans. And he answered the door drinking a beer, Schlitz, tall boy, which is what he always drank. And I put, yeah, Edward came to the door carrying a can of Schlitz in the, blue and gold can. And he was saying silver because it's a blue and silver can. And that's his remark on my journalism career summed up in one word. So in answer to your question, man, I don't know. I'd like to think he was maybe aware of it a little bit. Funny.
Wow. Yeah.
Attention to detail on the color of a beer can, Jimmy.
I know.
That's
I mean, isn't that so perfect though?
That's perfect.
I mean, isn't that like that? That's what he would pick up on. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
well, look.
Steve, go ahead.
Sorry,
go
Jimmy,
ahead.
I was going to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, go ahead, my friend. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say to people in the chat here, if you've got any questions for Steve, this is probably your best time to ask them. We've got Brad Cook, another good friend of ours, one of the co-hosts here on the channel from Australia. He's in the chat. I know that he has your book.
Man, he should have been on with us.
Yeah. He's busy gigging. So I know that he has your book too, Steve, in Australia as well. So
fantastic.
So he's a fan of what you've done. But I think at the end of the day, Steve, what we appreciate, about you is that you've spent time with Eddie, and that means something for first generation fans like us. And at the end of the day, when people are going to be doing research, and we've seen it before with other books, I'm a Clapton nut, and I've got lots of biographies on Eric Clapton, and you can see how every book that comes out always relates the research or, some of the referencing to 3 or 4 other books that came out in the 80s or the 90s, and, this is what journalists do. I'm sure you understand, Steve. They'll pick a paragraph or a couple of sentences that you write as an author, and they'll analyze it and spend 3 pages analyzing something that you've said in relation to an interview that you've done with an artist. And, I get that. That's all part of, of the business. But at the end of the day, you can't discount Jimmy, can you? The guy that broke it, that did it. The guy that spent time in the studio and drank some beers with Eddie.
And I mean, didn't just hang out. I mean, they were great friends, and, I'll tell you, I don't know if this is the time to talk about this or not, but the ending of that book is just really heartbreaking. I gotta say, it is just heartbreaking, right? I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
Maybe I did by saying that. I don't know, but I could not let this, could not let this podcast end without just mentioning that. It's just heartbreaking, man.
Jimmy, you've nailed it. And that's why it's one of the perfect music biographies, because it begins so fantastically, and it has the final chapter that Jimmy spoke about. Perfect.
Yeah, a lot of what Steve wrote in there hit home on a separate thing with me, and I'll explain that maybe later with you guys. But I can totally relate to what Steve went through with that. I'm not going to say any more. You got to read the book to see what happens. But I had to bring that up, and
Good on you, bro.
Very sympathetic to that. So Steve, I want to ask you, did he ever talk about Cabo Wabo and that whole thing that happened with Cabo Wabo to you?
I thought well, you probably remember better than me. I thought there were a couple lines in there when he's talking about Sammy as a business person. I don't think I ever, right. I think that's about as much as he ever talked about it. Yeah, that was a weird thing. I don't think I ever, specifically asked him about that. That was one of the things, I go back and I listen to the interviews and you know, I'm writing, I'm going, wow, that's great, that's great, that's great. But oh man, I wish I'd talked to him about that more, or I wish I had extrapolated that out, you know. Um, you know, yeah, something like, you know, yeah, Cabo Wabo, I wish I'd spoken about that, you know. I wish I'd spoken to him more about, you know, his early childhood, the kind of conversation I had with Alex, you know, and that's what I tried to get him to do. Ed, let's sit down. Ed, let's sit down. Ed, let's sit down. And Tony, my man.
Hey, Tony.
You know, but I couldn't get it all in. You know, I mean, I tried to, you know, get as much in as I could, and I tried to, you know, get him to sit as much as I could. Um, just wanted to go back to your comment just for 1 second, Andrew. Eric Clapton is the one person I've never interviewed that I've always wanted to interview. And I have this thing in my head, like, yeah, I was going to meet Eric and we were going to be like these amazing friends. And I was going to write the book about my friendship with Eric Clapton. You know, that never happened. But yeah, some of the other books, when people kind of write it from a distance, I'm not saying they can't be good books because we read those kinds of books. For me, I wrote a couple of those kinds of books. I wrote one on Prince and Springsteen. I was approached to write those books. I had never interviewed either of them, and they're okay. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine any. Look, I mean, we're waiting on Alex's book, and I think if he does the job we think he can do, I think that can be remarkable. I know that writer, and I forget her name, is a really, really excellent writer. And it's kind of interesting, apropos of nothing, but you know, that he would find a female writer, you know, who wrote for New Yorker. I don't think she's necessarily a music journalist. I'm sure she's an amazing writer, but it'll be an interesting approach. But and then getting back to your point, Jimmy, yeah, it was sad, you know. Yeah, it was sad. You know, some people say that had I written the book back in the day, that book would have been an entirely different book than Tonechaser, which it would have, obviously. But you know, it wouldn't have had maybe those kinds of moments in it. And maybe a heartbreaking moment like that is what gives the book the gravitas, and maybe, you know.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know,
I'm glad you mentioned that, Steve, because I was having a conversation with a couple of friends not long after the information of Alex's book was released, and the author coming from a magazine perspectives, journalistic school, the human interest stories, you know. So that's interesting in itself, because we spoke about that, because, you know, obviously if you got someone that had drumming, musician, what is it, the practicing drumming magazine, if you had that person write the book, you know, it would be a completely different book, wouldn't it, Jimmy?
Right.
From somebody who has the approach from, say, the New Yorker magazine. But clearly that's the position that Alex has chosen, perhaps to aim the book from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I wrote about it. Don Landy called me the other day, yesterday.
Don Landy?
Yeah, Don called me. I had reached out to Don. Why did I reach out to him? To
write his
book? I don't
book?
want to give this away. I can't tell you why I reached out to him. You will find out in a few days. An interview's going up. I think you guys are gonna really love this one. So I figure, and this is a little bit of a hint, Don knew this person. So I emailed Don, and he called me. It's funny, the number comes up, and I thought it was a telemarketing call, right? You know, the telemarketers will they'll put it like in an area code, a prefix that's close to you. So you think it's your buddy, or it's your brother, or your friend, right? And I look, and it was 818, which is the Valley, which is not far from where I live. You know, so I kind of pick it up and I go, hello. And he goes, hi, Steve. I go, hello. I still think, hi, Don Landy. And I thought, how does a telemarketer know Don Landy's name? I'm kidding. Anyway,
Yeah.
we had a conversation, and I was
Wow.
asking him about this person, and he filled in some holes. And then I sent him some emails. I had some follow-up questions. Um, I think I asked him something about Alex's book to get back to our point here. And he goes, yeah, the writer, this girl interviewed Alex and me, sat us down, and asked a lot of questions, and was really detail oriented. So Don will certainly be part of the book, whether it's going to be in Don's voice, whether it's her interpreting what he said, but they did reach out to Don, which how many people are really, really critical to Van Halen's history?
Yeah.
Wow.
Did they reach out to Mike or Dave? I don't know, but he said, yeah, she was just very professional. So and I've read some of her writing, and she's an astonishingly good writer. So it'll be interesting for sure.
That's
but
great.
yeah,
That's
Don.
amazing news.
Yeah, but Don was great, and he's been great with the book. And he goes, yeah, man, I went to Amazon to buy a copy of your book, and I couldn't find it. I go, Don, what are you doing? What do you mean you're going to go buy a copy of my book? I'll send you a copy. I thought he had gotten a copy somewhere, so I'm embarrassed because of that. But he went to Amazon when the second edition had run out, so it's just basically up there, book not available at this time.
Yeah.
And he thought, oh, what happened to your book? He thought maybe it was over or something. But he was great. He did tell me that he had been approached to, I think, redo the Sammy era stuff in that new Dolby Atmos, which I guess is like the newest iteration of Dolby. So that was interesting. And yeah, he says he works on projects from time to time.
Wow.
So
Don Landy is like a unicorn. That's like a unicorn calling you, man.
Yeah, I know. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And I can't believe he. Oh, Adam, my man. Of course you know him, Andrew. Adam does all of my YouTube stuff, and he edits everything, and he puts up with me. It's like, Adam, what do you mean you got a job and a family? I want that put up right now, pal. We got on a Zoom call because I could not figure out how to get my freaking YouTube page to work. I couldn't figure out how to put a comment on. So he sat there painstakingly with me, and he knows my password and everything, He goes, well, you got to put up a different account or something, The guy was so patient, and he teaches kids. I can't think of any better freaking teacher on the planet than Adam Roach. Plus the fact that he's like a 50-degree black belt, and if you get out of line, he's going to kick your butt all over the room. So
no kidding.
He's a sensei,
right?
sensei master.
He's amazing.
Sensei. Yeah, sensei. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. The sensei teacher, So so he's the best. But
Awesome.
yeah, Don Landy. Yeah, he's so I guess what needs to be done now is a book on Don, right?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are trying to get in touch with Don to like pick his brain about, the recording techniques and all that.
Yeah.
But, wow. That's some great news.
Yeah.
Next time you're talking to him, Steve, and if he wants to come on a YouTube channel, just invite him on. Come on, bring him on. Bring him on to the 5150 show, and
I'll ask him. He might on any given day. He might. Yeah, you never know. He might say yes. I can't believe he answers my emails.
Wow.
Well, you're somebody, Steve. Let's be fair.
Well,
come on, you're Steve Rosen, dude. Come
on. Yeah. You're an insider, and we appreciate you, and the fact that you just want to hang out with fans like Jimmy and I and everybody else in the chat, because that's all we are. And that's what our channel's about, Steve. It's about, getting together with like-minded people and just celebrating and talking about the music that we grew up with, that we're still listening to in our old age, and how that and how that doesn't change. And
Mhm.
you know, you were one of the first, I suppose, one of the first real authors to realize that social media was a tool to take advantage of. You know, and you did that with your first edition of your book. You know, you got out there and you marketed your book to the fans. A couple of years ago, we were streaming live at EVH Con, and you were part of that stream with us. Not the last one, the one before.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
and you know, people appreciated that. People appreciated the fact that you were in the trenches, Johnny. You know, and we would like to think maybe that Alex might do that when it comes to marketing his book. You know, we'd like to see maybe Alex jumping on the 5150 show or other YouTube shows and hanging out with the fans. I don't know if he will, but it would be nice
reason,
if
I
he.
doubt it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be
Absolutely.
nice if he did, because you know, a lot of bands and acts are doing it. I'm following Dream Theater at the moment. Mike Portnoy's rejoined Dream Theater, and every 2 or 3 days they're recording their album, and they put out posts on social media, as you guys would expect, talking directly to their fans about the progress. You kind of appreciate that stuff.
That's interesting you bring that up, Andrew, because yes, not having a publisher, not having a publicist, you know, so I'm now sitting on a condo full of books, and it's like, okay, you got to go sell some books now, you know, and I don't know enough about social media to know I don't know enough about social media, but I thought, well, listen, man, I've been writing about musicians for 50 years. You know, I'm hoping that counts for something. So let me maybe reach out to some of these guys I interviewed back in the day. You know, not that they owe me anything, but they say, oh yeah, Steve Rosen, he interviewed me and he wrote a book, and yeah, I want to check out his book, you know. And so you see those photos, and to me, that's just respect. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, right, fans see that and they go, yeah, Joe Satriani likes a book. Maybe I'll check that book out, you know. And it just becomes this organic thing. And doing podcasts like this, which I've never done before, you know, I thought, well, is anybody really going to care what I have to say, you know, or these people who are on the other side of the screen here are, you know, will they have read the book? Are they just going to talk about Van Halen in general terms? You know, am I going to embarrass myself? But it's been the opposite. I mean, you guys, you know more about the minutiae of Van Halen than I'll ever know. You know, you obviously care so much, and that comes through. You know, and yeah, so I really appreciate you saying that. I was kind of one of the first guys to do that. You know, yeah, in that respect, social media is amazing. And now that I know how to leave comments on my YouTube page, you're going to really see me go to town. Thank you, Adam Roach.
All right.
But yeah, you know, and trying to reach out to that next guy who I think would love to read, you know, he'd love to read the book, you know, and trying to get through to him, you know, and then, you know, trying to get through those layers of, you know, management and publicists and stuff, you know. But it's all good, man. It's all like this great adventure, you know. When somebody sends me a photo, somebody put with their book, and somebody puts up a post, when somebody has me onto a podcast, man, it's like, it's great for me. It's like recognition is wonderful. I mean, whoever says it's not is, you know, they're lying. So, you know, yeah,
I mean, you put so much work into this thing too. So
yeah, we appreciate it, and we'll do everything that we can to help promote your book. In reply to doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to present you, and if you could do a bumper for us so that I could go and edit that out later, and if you could just say something like, hey guys, Steve Rosen here, author from Tonechaser, and you're watching the guys on the 5150 show, we'd love to do that, and we'll put that on our social media links, Steve, and put links to your book. So we're going to, don't do that yet. We'll do that soon. We'll do that towards the end of the video, but I'm just looking at the time now. We're going to probably wind up the show, and we're going to make sure that people, if you're watching on a replay, please, we'll have the links here. And Jimmy's already told you guys, there's two things you need to do if you're a Van Halen fan. You need to have Tonechaser If you don't have it, you need to go and buy it. You also need to go and check out Steve Rosen's YouTube channel, and I will include that, and go and listen to the 5-hour mega interview with Alex Van Halen. It's a perfect primer for Alex's book that's coming out in October.
It's amazing. I was telling my buddy Les a while back that, like, you know, when we were kids, you know, I don't know, 1981, 82, 83 or whatever, there might have been, like, you know, I don't know, let's say 50 million Van Halen fans, okay? But over those years, over those 40 years, right? It's come down to these guys in the chat, right? And you know, the other great, you know, Van Halen shows that are on the internet and stuff, but this community is the diehard fans that have followed this band for 40 years, right? And like, this is the target audience. This is the audience, right? Yeah, of course, you want to send, you know, you want to kind of like reach out to other people, you know, peripheral fans and stuff. But like, these are the guys that are going to really care, you know. So if you don't have this book, get this book. It's not that expensive, right? Especially here in the U.S., right? Get this book. You know, listen to, you know, go to Steve's page, check out any of those interviews that he's got. But that Alex Van Halen one is just, Alex is so friggin' cool and is so helpful. I can't believe how helpful the guy is, right? It's just really great. It kind of like I said in the beginning, it gives you faith that this book's going to be great. I don't know if this, honestly, that 5-hour interview is almost as good as a book, man. You know, you hear Eddie's early life, you know, before he came to America. I mean, you get into the details of like what street they lived on and stuff. You know, it's amazing, man. It's amazing. You know,
you know, I had this fantasy, you know, and this is probably stupid, you know, that somebody from the Van Halen estate,
yeah.
you know, when Alex was working on the book, had they come to me, you know, not that they would, again, I'm just fantasizing here, you know, I mean, I would have given them access to anything I had. I mean, I would have given him that that interview with Alex, you know, before it was posted. You know, I would give him the one. Yeah, I don't know. I just, because his book is important, because he's the last one to tell this tale. But I don't know, man. I just think about those things. You know, I hope that if they are aware of my book, that they understand the point of view that I was coming from, and you know, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody, embarrass anybody. You know, opposite. You know, it was you know, some people say, oh, it's a 580 page, you know, homage to your buddy, which it was. You know, I mean, so I don't know, man. I just hope that, you know, the Van Halen family understands the book, and you know, they can appreciate the amount of work that it took to put it together. And yeah.
When I heard the news about this book, I mean, you know, years before, my friends and I would talk, and we're like, man, you know, I think the best book would be from Michael Anthony, because like you kind of get like but Mike's probably not going to write a book, and it's certainly not going to be. I'm not, you know, for Mike, I'm not looking for like dirt. I'm just looking for like what it was like, right? Because only four of those guys lived that life. But this book, man, is just, this is the closest thing to a Michael Anthony book, man. Really is. Really is. I can't, you know, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I keep saying, if you don't have this book, you need to get this book, you know.
Good on you.
If you care about Eddie, and you do, because you're here, you know, you have to get this book.
Awesome.
You know, and I'm glad that this thing's working out for you, and you're on your third, you know, pressing or whatever it's called. So congratulations, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Congratulations.
You deserve it. You deserve it. Yeah.
Well done, Jimmy. Well done. Yeah. And we'd like to say, if you are watching and you've not already subscribed to our channel, please do. We're going to give Steve the last word, and we're going to end the show. And like I say, we'll have the links for everything if you are watching on a replay. And we really appreciate everybody that's joined us live here on the stream. And thank you, Steve, for your time. Thank you, Jimmy, as ever, for your time, because at the end of the day, you know, Jimmy, we're just the fans hanging out.
That's what we say, man.
Steve,
We're just stupid fans. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
Steve, we're going to present you, and if you could do a bumper for us, please, for our channel and also for your book, that would be great.
Hey, everybody. Steve Rosen. I'm the author of Tonechaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen, my book. Check it out. Check it out as soon as you can. And also go by and check out the 5150 show. These guys are amazing. I had an extraordinary conversation with them. You need to go listen to them, okay? See you, everybody. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we're going to end the
Okay?
show.
Love it.
Wonderful. Thank you, bro. Wonderful.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
man.
everybody.
All right, guys. Thank you, Steve.
See you guys.